This is Chapter 1, Enter Cat of Catpire. In another part of town, a female human sat in a big chair across from a glowing black box inside another big brown box structure. She had a sort of white hair that was very long that fell to her sides. Her eyes were staring at the box as it changed over and over. It had been 2 years since Scal's family rescued Cat from her mother's dead embrace. As for her brother, she heard that he wasn't there when they found her lying there, newly alive. Another male human sat across from the female, holding a large piece of paper. Katrina watched them both closely and flopped loudly on the soft floor to see if they noticed her, but they didn't. Occasionally, the male human shook his big paper and looked at the glowing box, but hardly ever at her, sadly. Good thing she always knew ways to get their attention if her cute stretching didn't work. Katrina got up slowly and slunk over to the back of the man's chair. Bracing her black legs, she sprung to the top and walked onto his shoulders and perched there to see his reaction. He nearly jumped out of his skin when she initially perched. He dropped his big paper down to his lap and reached over his shoulder to her. He then patted her head and stroked her back once. Katrina purred at the caress of his hand, bumped her head against it, and she kneaded her claws on him, but it was short-lived. He grabbed her under the belly, set her down on the floor, and picked up his paper again. Cat's paws tingled as they touched down on the floor. Suddenly, the man slumped over and fell asleep. Well, that was strange and disappointing, Cat thought. The human female said her male's name, but got up and walked over to the male when she realized he was asleep. She appeared worried, but not enough to be alarmed. She moved the top part of his arms up, then down, and withdrew back to her seat. This had Cat wondering now. She didn't register the tingling in her claws initially, but now she focused on that sensation. As she was about to lick her paw, the tingling stopped as she retracted her claws. She stared at her pad for a moment, then shook her head and put her paw down again. Then she slumped down on the floor, curled up, and took a nap. Later, Cat awoke to a dark house. The floor in the room she was in was now cold, even though she was on carpet. She got up and arched her back, stretching her paws forward with one leg out behind her up off the floor. She began to walk around the room looking for her humans. They must be in bed now, too, she thought to herself. Her eyes scanned the walls of her home. There were pictures of her two humans on them with another cat she didn't recognize. Only a select few, though. If in one of them she saw a collar with a small bell on it, but the only letter she could make out was an S. He didn't look happy in them, even though the humans were. Maybe that was just his demeanor? Demeanor? How do I know that word? She thought to herself. I must be as smart as these humans seem to be. No way, I'm smarter because I'm a cat. I don't really need them except for the tasty food in the bowl. That and the comfy areas to sleep. Katrina thought back to the time she had ventured outside once when she was littler. She had bolted out of a door into sunlight when they left it open too long. There was a large yard to roll around, and the sunlight was warm on her back. But when she realized it was empty, she turned back toward the door. But by that time it was shut. She reached up to it with her claws and mewed, but the humans must not have been able to hear her, because she was stuck outside for what seemed like an eternity. She sniffed around the grass for a while, but she couldn't find any other signs of life. She tried laying down in the grass for a while, but the sun was actually too hot after a while. She tried mewing at the door again. Still no sounds or movement from behind it. She began to feel afraid. As she looked around, she saw a hard gray surface with another thing with big round black circles. She rubbed her paw on it first. It wasn't as hard as the gray surface, so she extended her claws and grabbed at it. Her claws sank into it a little. She liked that, but her claw wouldn't come back out at first, and a tingling sensation erupted from it. She pulled and yowled. She was stuck. Just when she thought she was going to be stuck there forever, a shadow appeared above her. How did she not hear anything? She looked up and mewed again. It was the female human standing over her, creating the shadow. The shade she created felt nicer than the sun beating down on her. When she mewed, the female human came closer to her with a smile. Hey Kiki, let me help you, she said. Cat mewed frantically until the human pulled her claw out and picked her up by her belly. It's okay now, don't worry, the female human said. When Katrina realized she was safe, she began mewing excitedly. She rubbed her head on the female's hand and purred. Katrina was happy she wasn't as hot and lonely as she was. "Who's my precious Kiki?" the human female said. If Kiki meant cat, then that's me, Cat thought. The female human continued rubbing her head as she walked back through the door with her. Once she was back inside, Katrina began to squirm in the female human's hands, and when the female human loosened her grip on her, she jumped out of them. It was a long drop, but Cat knew she'd be okay. Cat ran around the room excitedly for a time, rolled over, and peered back up at the female human. She was watching her. Katrina waddled over to her and began rubbing her side against her, mewing and purring. The female human's face appeared happy that she was happy. "I'll just look out the window at the sunlight from now on," Katrina thought. The female human walked over to her seat and sat down. Katrina climbed up to her and laid her on her lap and closed her eyes, purring contentedly. A dark brown cat watches Cat from a window as Cat falls asleep. I probably should have wrote Katrina more than Cat, but Katrina hadn't been outside a door since that experience. Her black fur, of course, attracted the sun's heat too much, but the fear of getting stuck in the tire was still fresh in her mind as well. She recalled her human female recounting her story to the male, so that round black object was called a tire. And since the humans rode inside the contraption with the tires, there must be a lot of them. Katrina knew not to claw tires again, although she was able to control them better now. The tingling sensation wasn't happening in her claws often anymore either, so something must have changed with them as she got older. She had tested this theory several times on other objects after her experience beyond the door. On the furry floor, on wood, in her letter box. The tingling sensation only lasted while she kept her claws out and embedded in something for a fixed amount of time. And after recalling back to see her human male go to sleep, she deduced that that was what she could do with them, since they just continued tingling on other things. A good thing to know if they ever annoyed her or she wanted to sneak out at night easier. And sneak out at night she did. It was much more peaceful outside with the sun gone. She had no desire to go under the tire contraption at night for shade, so instead she had been exploring her enclosure and beyond. She did not want to go too far yet, though, because of all the other tire contraptions roaming the streets. So instead she found a tree close to her house. She enjoyed climbing it and scoping out the neighborhood. She saw a few other felines below her from a distance, a dark brown, a white, a striped one, but none ventured toward her, although the dark brown one showed a slightly interested gaze. That very fact intrigued her. She wouldn't mind having at least one other feline friend, but at the same time she preferred solidarity. So it was always a constant debate within her to decide whether or not to approach any. She was even tempted when she saw one being chased by a mutt. "I think I'll attempt to communicate with another feline if I see a mutt again." That really bothered me, stupid mongrels. What she didn't expect was for that day to be the very next one. Waiting until her humans went to sleep was sometimes agonizing. They didn't always want to pet her or play with her, even though they gave her things to amuse herself with. The string ball was the highlight of her day, but she would eventually get bored of that too. To gauge their reaction, she would start small, but then become crazed. It was quite amusing. Katrina walked up to the male and rubbed her side on his legs. His initial reaction was merely adjusting his feet as not to step on her. Next, she raked her claws on his leg sleeves. He jumped a little. Hang on a second. When she did that, which was delightful. Now to put the tuna on the cat food, Katrina thought. She sprang up beside him, yowled loudly, and sank her claws into his shoulder. At first, he looked at her alarmed and then slumped over. Cat happily kneaded her claws on his back afterward, purring and meowing. Her female human was already slumbering in her bed upstairs, though. Finally, free to do as I please now, Cat thought. Time for a nightly adventure.